Hello, I think we're ready to begin and get the webinar going. This is the first webinar for this series. We worked with CSD Learns and Wells Fargo Foundation and started this project over 1 year ago with CSD Learns, who received the grant from Wells Fargo to set up this course linked to the deaf community and the educational community to help teach youth. We're really excited about this webinar series and ready to go. And so am I. The webinar topic is named Starting Young, Teaching Young Deaf Youth Financial Foundations in Elementary Environment, knowing that the earlier they get this, the better it is. Sure, we want to make sure right from the beginning that everyone knows how to use Zoom. Please make sure that you have the updated version. When you're viewing your screen, at the top right, there's a button that's titled Gallery, and then you can see both the screen shared presentation and the presenters. Today, we're going to talk about the goal for this series. It's very important for me to hold space for educators and parents and others within the community to talk about deaf financial education and the best practices for deaf and hard of hearing students. We are a widespread community, but because of the internet services we have and the technology with this webinar, we can all come together and be in one room for this process. We need parents to help spread the awareness and experts in deaf education and in the community to be out there spreading this within the community. I'd like to talk about some of our goals now. We're facing some of the same challenges for financial literacy in the community. We see deaf children experiencing this both in residential settings, at home, and mainstreaming. One is setting goals and becoming experts in financial education, bringing the knowledge of the experts in the deaf community to the local community. We need experts with strategies in teaching education to bring them here. So if we can get together on the internet and work within them, we can benefit everyone with this knowledge and awareness that we have in the deaf community. And we'd like to give those who have any burning questions an opportunity to ask them. If you have a question ongoing during the seminar, then we need to be able to address that. Asking questions like, when is the best time to introduce them to or give them money? And look at some of the opportunities we're having to approach those situations. It's important to share financial education and resources as a tool. At the end of this webinar, you'll see we'll have a page of different resources and apps and programs that you can take advantage of to teach your children through play. Playing and learning are the ways that we incorporate financial knowledge. It's important as we work in the deaf community to increase that knowledge and awareness through social experiences and knowledge, and gaining practice will improve the continued education of children, and that's necessary through adults. I want to check in and make sure that everyone has access at this time. You should be able to see two people. You should see me, Joseph, and the co-panelist, Randy Bickford. I'd like to start by introducing myself. My name is Joseph Santini, and I am the Director of Instruction at the Clare Center in Washington, D.C. I work on research and strategy and the effectiveness of teaching deaf and hard of hearing children, especially specialized in PPD, children in PPD programs. And tonight, I'd like you to meet Randy Bickford, who is our co-presenter. She has been teaching for many years and is an expert in financial and math education. And she also is a coach for our math competition team as well at the Clare Center. Randy, do you mind taking a moment to introduce yourself and saying a little bit about the topic? Hello, I'm Randy. I work as a teacher. I have worked as a teacher for 18 years, and this year I became the coordinator of teaching and learning. And I support and co-teaching and working with math and science and STEM fields. So that's why I'm here to support tonight, to talk a little bit about teaching financial literacy. I asked Randy if she wouldn't mind talking a little bit about how to motivate deaf children as learners, how to get them excited about developing these skills. Randy's skill set is very impressive, and our CSD learning team, using their supports, were able to host this webinar. They've made it possible. Thank you to CSD Learns team for making this possible, and hello to all of you. Hi, we're the CSD Learns team here to support the webinar. If you need tech support, please feel free to chat something in the chat box. If you type that in there, we'll be able to address that at that point. If you see view options to answer some of the questions in the chat box, you have at the very top of the screen in the middle, view options. And you can check full presentation, see full presentation, and you should be able to see both the presenters and the PowerPoint. Thanks, y'all. Thank you to the team. Yes, great. Okay, so it's really important to check to see your viewing options. And like was said, it's in the top middle of your screen. If you click the drop-down menu, you'll be able to click side by side, and that'll allow you to see both us and the PowerPoint presentation. There are two important programs that we'd like to acknowledge. CSD Learns, even though it's only 3 years old, it has online content available to serve the deaf and hard of hearing community. We'd also like to thank Wells Fargo for their support and their hands-on banking app. That program was established specifically to teach mainly hearing people within the United States financial literacy, and we're in partnership with them to bring that knowledge to the deaf community. Moving on to the next slide. I am ready to begin. Let's dive in and talk about starting young, teaching deaf youth financial literacy. We'd like to talk a little bit about how we can start them in education of financial literacy in the field, in the school system. We're going to talk about 3 important topics, starting young specifically. The best practice with either deaf or hearing children, all children, basically is that, parents look at children as young and cute and sweet and wonder what age they should start helping children learn financial responsibility. You start them young, teaching them about the fundamentals, and then expand on that as they grow. Money impacts every part of our life. And it's a big part of the system that we need to deal with in adulthood. To help them be successful later in life, we have to start that foundation early and teach that about money having an impact on our society. And children have a hard time connecting debit cards and money to work. We used to have actual cash money that we held. We had coins and we had other money we could use, but now we use a debit card, and that's more of an abstract concept. So we'll talk more about that this evening. We also want to talk about some vocabulary that may come up during this topic on this webinar. STEM and STEAM stand for, STEM is science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. The next word we want to talk about is finance. Basically, it's money, learning how to earn, how to use money, how to spend it. And the third topic is gamification. This is where we'll use gaming to learn important topics. We'll show you some of these tonight. It's kind of fun. You can learn so many new things through gaming, and kids are doing that today. Next slide, please. I want to share some research about education and financial literacy for deaf and hard of hearing children in elementary school age. Research shows that children are ready to start learning at ages 3 to 5 years old. Randy, can you speak a little bit about that research? Absolutely. Yes, it's accurate. 60% of Americans don't have retirement savings. That shows us that we need to start early, that we need to teach it at a very young age. And 40% of Americans don't have cash to pay for unexpected bills. If someone had an ER visit or another situation, if they have to be taken because of an injury to a hospital by ambulance, they don't have that money. So savings is important. And 78% of employees, based on research in the USA, live paycheck to paycheck. They don't have any money at all in savings. So if emergencies happen for their children or themselves, they're in a situation where they're unable to manage that. Randy, do you mind expanding a little bit about the other slide? We face challenges in financial education for deaf and hard of hearing elementary students because they often don't have equal access. They don't have the same access that everyone else has. There are some language issues. Some signs maybe are signed, and some may be English, and some may be ASL, but they're not standardized. So it's hard to know how to incorporate the information without standardized signs. There's also bias and stereotypes. People sometimes feel that deaf youth don't need to learn it when they're young, that they can learn it later, but the value is on them learning as very young children. I previously taught in mainstream schools and at the deaf schools, deaf residential schools, and I noticed the difference. In mainstream schools, there were interpreters, and we don't know what their financial vocabulary literacy was. And also at the deaf school, they taught and trained in deaf ed, but not only financially, not always having financial knowledge and awareness to be able to teach in deaf, even through sign language, to the deaf children. So I noticed that there's two sides of the coin. There are problems on both sides, and having signs for specific concepts are a problem. If the sign bill, a bill like a bill is delivered, or it's a charge, or finger spelling a bill, those things are really confusing, and it's a challenge across the United States. Oh, it's time for our first poll question. We're very excited. Zoom does allow us to ask the poll question. We'd like to have that poll come up so that you can join us tonight. We'd like to know who's here, who's with us. Do we have parents, teachers, social workers, deaf youth? Click which one you are so we can get some statistics about who's on the call tonight. I'd like to know who's here tonight. I'm thinking maybe parents and teachers are the highest number. Looking forward to seeing what those numbers are. I'm going for the top two. I think parents and teachers. Okay, I think we're getting a lot of emails. I have received emails from social workers who are unfamiliar with W-2 and don't know what to do when they're working and how to explain those concepts for people who are working. Okay, you should all see the poll. It should pop up on your screen. Please click your answers now. It seems we have 11 out of 13 people answer. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll at this time. And now we can see the results. Look at that. Teachers heavily outweigh parents. We have about over 70% teachers, and then the remaining audience is actually parents. So We can see parents and teachers. Welcome. We're so happy that you're here this evening. And I know especially on a Tuesday night, teachers particularly are probably tired. So thank you for being here. We're going to start our first discussion question. We'll have 6 discussion questions tonight, and we'll after we talk about them, we should open it up for a chat. Our first discussion question is, what happens if we start teaching deaf children financial knowledge young? What happens? What's the benefit? It's really valuable to teach them when they're young, because they need to become very comfortable with money. They need to know how to manage money well and to understand savings and debits and deposits and what all those things mean. To be able to have choices. Once they understand the principles, then as they get older, they know how to make choices based on the information as they got when they were young. If we wait too long, then it's a struggle to learn those concepts. So we want to get ahead of the game, and we want to start young. What age do you think we should start, Joseph? Oh, I feel early. Maybe 3rd grade or before? Well, that's a question we'll answer. Okay, this is good. If you don't mind going to the next slide. I'd like to know your thoughts. What happens if you start to teach deaf youth? At what age do you think they should start learning? And what do you think they should learn? I have friends who are adults who are uncomfortable with money. If they receive a bill, they get nervous and they get out of sorts because they're unsure what to do. Yes, it is stressful when we're not competent with handling money. So knowing what to do with money and having money management skills definitely reduces the stress. I'd like to see if we have any audience comments at this time. Molly White has the comment. It's important to learn about money. So what kind of strategies do you feel is appropriate? And we'll have some discussions about that as we move forward with the next slide. Oh, here we are. This is it. You said 3rd grade, Joseph. What age do we want to begin? I would say starting at age 3 or 4. In pre-K. Why pre-K in age 3 and 4? Why is that important? We want to give them choices because for lunch, they may want peanut butter or they want a ham and cheese sandwich and they have to pick one. So if you give them 2 choices and they get to pick one, later when they go to the store, they understand that they can't buy everything because of limited resources. So they have practice choosing one thing. I see children sometimes going to the store with their parents wanting everything and really haranguing their parents to get what they want. So how can parents help them figure out which one thing they can choose? You give them 2 choices and you explain to them that they can't have everything. They're shopping and we're getting a lot of things, but these 2 things they have a choice about. So once they practice their choosing skills, then that'll have a result later. And it's really important for parents to watch and, give them some hard choices and not be too flexible. Is that right, Randy? That is correct. Yes. Some parents waver, and that's the challenge. It's hard to resist that wavering. I've experienced that myself. So let's go on to the next slide. What do you feel is the age to teach your children money literacy? Please feel free to put your comments in the chat box. Randy wants to wait just a minute to answer because I remember my sister started teaching her children financial literacy. And, her son was wanted to use his card for Amazon shopping and just kind of spent all the money on the card that he was given. And so my sister decided that next time she would just give him a few dollar bills rather than a card. And how old was he? He was 5. He's 5 years old. Oh, you should stay at 5. You should give him a $5 at age 5. Give them an allowance of $5 and base how much they get on their age. So as they're young, as they get older, you can obviously give them more, but as they're 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, you want to increase the amount based on how many years old they are. But to give them a card, wow, I'm sorry about that. And I do have some responses from parents we need to see here. Interesting. One person, Debbie, said that we have a strong relationship between math literacy skills and poverty, or that's one reason we're teaching to you, to prevent that problem, to help reduce poverty. One of the reasons that we have to directly teach deaf youth is because they don't have incidental hearing and incidental learning as a result. So we have to directly teach these topics that might be incidentally learned otherwise. We absolutely have to help teachers and parents fill the gaps in the deaf child's education. And we need to talk about simple concepts about why we're doing things or how we pay bills so that they can start to learn intrinsically why we're doing those things. We have to be very open and share this information with our children and tell them stories so that they can start to understand the concepts and know what we're doing. This is great audience participation. Thank you. We're moving on to the next slide. And the next poll question will give you 4 choices. What's the best way to teach deaf youth financial knowledge? Hands-on activities, real-life applications, worksheets that they write on, or games? What are your thoughts? Oh, these are tough choices. What's your personal favorite? Which one do you like? Yeah. Randy, which one do you like? Oh, for me, rather than teaching, which one would I rather have? I don't know. Hands-on, but real life application, but games, and so I'll have to go between those 3. Those are my favorites. Excuse me. For me personally, real life application, probably. Yes, real life application. For me, that's my personal favorite, probably. Yeah, I had to check in. For me, it's games all the way. I know one game on my phone that I like to play called the Billionaire Game. And it's really silly, but I enjoy it. And I'm trying really hard to catch all the money to become rich. And I think children do enjoy that too. We notice now that 10 out of 13 people have finish the poll results. So finish the poll. We're going to show the results now. Oh, most people felt kind of the same as I did. Yes, we should talk about the statistics. Hands-on activity was 36%. Real life applications, 45%. And that is the best way to teach. And gaming was at 18%. Oh, it disappointed me. But all 3 of those are good. All 3, hands-on, real-life application, and games are all good. But a worksheet is not the best way to teach financial awareness because it's very abstract, and children get distracted and have a difficult time relating that to the real-life application. Our third discussion question is, we have different ways to teach children relationships between money, work, earnings, and savings. Randy, do you have some thoughts about that? Oh, I have many thoughts about that, especially young kids, maybe kindergarten. Between, I'd say, kindergarten, we can start talking about borrowing markers, for example, and giving them back. So we can talk, about borrowing and lending and paying back. Also, earnings can be taught through tickets so that they can earn tickets and then make a purchase. I remember I had a classroom store when I taught before, and the kids would come into my classroom, and they knew that all day they could earn money. Basically, they would come to school, and if they came to school, if they finished homework, if they put the name and date on their paperwork, if they did those things, then they would get money. And if they forgot, then I would take money out of their earnings. So I would write them a check by the end of the week so they could learn how to endorse it on the back of the check and deposit it into the bank. They kept their balance. So it was very much like a checking account. And on Friday, they would go to the store to buy erasers or pencils or paper or other things that they could use in the classroom. And the kids who weren't interested in that, could get, say, a toy or hot chocolate, or could buy a doll or other things. So they had to decide whether to spend it every Friday or to save up their money. So they had to face choices. And so when we would take money, they would have to write a check to me. So in some classes, we also used basically a debit card or ATM card and how it worked. And so we showed them that. And there were other times, for example, that we developed businesses in class, and they had to figure out how to advertise their businesses, market their businesses, and figure out how to start the business by buying inventory or other things, and how to document what they spend as well as what they sold. And at the end of the process, they had to compare their spending to their earnings and what kind of profit they were left with in the end. There are many activities that can happen in the classroom. It seems like there are many skills being taught at one time through this process. They also gain work experience and understand everyday work life basically through their school experience. They learn saving skills because they learn whether or not they want to buy something immediately or save it for a bigger purchase later. Yes, and also, if something was if something came out of their check because they forgot to put something on the paper, like put down a date, then they would lose money out of their earnings. And that was important to them. So they learned to start being careful as well. This is all great. And running a business and starting a business, really got us to discuss business systems. And we started talking about how to borrow from a bank, how to sell things and earn it and to pay the bank back. And they got to look at what was left as a profit. And that was really foundational. Wow, that's a real bridge to them having a real bank account. Let's go on to the next slide. Hi, this is CSD Support. There's a quick question we need to answer. One from Tegan, who says, is it better to have money related to work rather than behavior because they're earning it? Or with young students, is it sometimes important that as young students, this is just an important skill to expose them to? Give us just a second. Yeah, I tend not to relate money to behavior, more just general activities, because I don't want behavior to become negative. I want it to be more general application to real life and how money is earned and how it's used in different ways. I separate behavior from this process because tickets can be, for example, I'm trying to think of what they could do to earn tickets. Yeah, maybe I need to get Joseph to help me here. Well, the person who brought up that question, I'd like to thank you, because there are really two important things that I would not time money skills too. Behavior is one of them. Randy nailed it on that one. And the other one is grades or test scores. We try to keep those things separate because it impacts them in a different way, and we don't want to do that. And also it causes additional anxiety and stress that they must do well on the test to get an A to earn money, and that's not how we want them to approach it. And we want them to have a tie-in to their daily tasks. It's something that they're doing every day that's based on time, maybe, or presenting their homework on time, having their name and dates on paperwork that they should be able to do every day. That's one of the ways that they earn money. And for this type of employment, we want to remove it from being associated with both behavior and grades. And for the CSD Learn team, thank you very much. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. What's the relationship between money, work, and savings? What are your thoughts? Let's discuss it here. I know we have some suggestions that were brought up on the chat box by Mike Kane, using fake settings such as office, bank, and store, cardboard boxes for young kids. So setting up a bank or a store is great to have those different boxes. That's fantastic. What a cool idea. Thank you, Mike. Another participant, Guthrie, says, I'm wondering how we can teach lessons that the choices can be tied to the results or limitations while keeping the learning experience positive. We can talk about choices in general. They can be, well, real life examples are the car. A car is a fine example. What kind of car do you want to buy? Suppose you want a Cadillac or a Toyota. And compare and research the prices for both of those, the taxes for each of those cars, and how much money you have and which car you're able to afford. A Cadillac may have a monthly payment that's outrageous, while a Toyota may have an affordable payment. So it's important to consider both those. So talking about choices in that way are important. You want to motivate them to learn at the same time. Well, that's great. I see there are more questions. This is a great discussion we're having so far. Another one says, I teach financial literacy class to juniors and seniors. We have a classroom economy. They have jobs in the classroom and earn a weekly salary. There are also extra ways to earn money, and some are related to behavior, i.e. helping a friend, working well in class. They can also be fined for being late or being distracted. I wouldn't consider those necessarily behavior. When I think about behavior is when I think good behavior or, behavioral problems. I think, just natural behavior, I think that's positive, and to look at it that way. If you find the students for being late or if they become distracted, I can see that as being a good strategy. But one thing I do want to warn you about is that some students face challenges that are outside of their control. So it's important to make sure that it's not in the IEP in the student's IEP and not something that they're not able to control. And Lisa Marie brought up something. What about fundraising or something? And you have done fundraising, is that right, Randy? Oh, yes, we did it for the yearbook last year, and the students told me that they want to buy a camera and a hard drive and batteries and other, USB, other technical equipment. So I asked them to research how much we'd need, and they did the research, and after they compiled the research, we needed about $2,000. So we asked them how they wanted to raise it. They considered a bake sale, but that takes forever. So I told them they had to come up with ideas. They discussed a car wash. They looked at different fundraisers, and they finally decided that they would do a bake sale at Gallaudet and earn money. And it wasn't enough. So they did a car wash, and then after that, it still was not enough. So they started to ask for donations. So they had to reach out and contact the PTA president and ask them if they could get support. And they had to write a letter and send a video. And they sent us a little bit of money as a result of that effort. So that was great. And so they did different fundraising activities and received donations as well. I really like that idea that students should be active, to be able to research and set a budget and plan events and activities in order to lead to the results that they're looking for. Yeah, they did it all hands-on. What a great teaching method. And they felt so proud afterwards. When they reached their goal and were successful, they were very excited and proud of their work. Okay, I think it's time for the next slide. Thank you. Okay, the next question is, what financial literacy topics should be covered in schools and at what ages? We talked about you can't teach a 3-year-old investing, for example, right? No, not at all. So, how do parents, what should they look for? Well, there are 6 different parts of financial literacy: savings and spending, credit and debit, employment and income, investing, and risk insurance. And the 6th one is financial decision making. So really, investment tends to be in high school or so. So saving and spending can start very young. And it starts with decision making at a very young age, to know that you have 2 choices and you can pick one. Credit and debit can be a little bit older, around 3rd grade and up. Employment income should start towards the end, late 5th grade. And risk insurance tends to be in middle and high school. And all of those kind of can vary depending on the child. I was kind of surprised about some of those topics, like, really, risk? I mean, is that important? It's valuable. What kinds of things do you do at that age to teach about that? For example, dealing with my middle schoolers last year about how I'd like to buy something, but making a decision about which one to buy, and looking at one that may be expensive compared to other ones. And the students had to figure out one is better and why it's better. Looking at interest rates and other factors involved in that, so that they could become a good financial decision maker. Many of these 6 things overlap. These topics overlap each other, and it's not necessarily separate lessons. It seems really important for the teachers or the parents, either way, to be willing to have discussions with the children about it, and also to permit the children to consider it and give them some of the processing over to them to find an answer. Yes, that's it exactly. So to be able to make decisions for themselves, making those decisions for themselves, is a really powerful thing. Let's move on to the next slide. I think we'll also have some more participation from our audience. One question that was asked, it said, "This is great information. Do you have a list of how all of these topics can relate to the associate age that you want to teach it?" Absolutely. That's in the resource page at the end of the webinar in the PowerPoint. You can click on that. And if you have another question about how do we convince mainstream teachers to participate in teaching these skills, that would be a challenge. It's my experience that teaching in a mainstream school, that where the biggest challenges for deaf children is expectations, and mostly from hearing teachers. What we set as expectations about what deaf people can or cannot do. That stereotype or bias affects how we teach children and affects what we expect from them. That's one problem. An additional problem is that they're often pulled from the regular classroom for speech therapy, occupational therapy, or other needs. So that means that those children in mainstream settings are not getting enough time in math literacy. They may be there for the lecture, but not in class for the activity because they're pulled out. So they don't have access to that information or practice of that information. So mainstream teachers we really need to emphasize the children, have that practice every day, and they need to have role play and hands-on experience with these tools. Yes, that applies to high school as well, not just middle school. Okay, there are additional questions. This is also from Tally Cohen. I'm doing a unit on taxes right now. Which domain does that fall in? I think it could go to investment, credit, debit, risk, and insurance. It kind of expands across several domains. Yeah, it could be income also. They overlap. Because you have taxes that you have to pay. So really it hits every section. Yes, often it's not just one of those categories that we're teaching them all inclusively. Thank you for that question, Tally. We're moving on to the next slide. The next question is, how do parents support financial learning at home? Oh, one way is Monopoly. Are you familiar with Monopoly? Oh yeah, always won. You always won. Okay, well, now they have a new one with cards. It's not money anymore. It's debit cards. You use the debit card and you put it in like a credit card. You put it in a machine. Obviously, I'm behind the times. I have no idea, and that works. Yes, it's the same. They have the technology. You put it in, and it takes the money out. You put the card in the machine. And suppose if you don't know how much money you have, you can check your balance as well. And realize that you're unable to buy some of the realty that you want to buy in the game of Monopoly. I mentioned before that young kids start small and then increase their skills. So you can use allowance to help them buy what they want. And parents can say no, that they're not going to buy something, that they can use their allowance. And kids often feel like, no, I don't want to spend that money. That's my allowance. I earned it. And that's one of the ways to teach them about choices. Rather than us buying things for them, giving them an allowance and letting them buy it with their money, so they can start to learn the value of the money that they've earned. So when they go to the store and ask for a purchase, you have to help them make choices about what they want to buy with their money, whether they have enough money to do that. And they need to understand that we're not buying it for them, that they get to buy it with their money. And also understanding that when we do take them somewhere, that we have to tell them we have limited money. We can't buy those things as well. So you have to have discussions with them. I have to tell them what I pay for so that they can understand that I pay many different bills, that I'm not just walking through life every day. They don't just realize that the things that are happening behind the scene, but it all comes down to choices all the time. Absolutely. And I remember many times, I was lucky growing up that, I had my mother there with me, and she would teach me how to pay the bills side by side with her. And that was really nice. That helped me understand things. And another challenge that I really appreciated that I want to throw out to you is playing the game Catan. And are you familiar with that? Well, I'm vaguely familiar with the game, yes. That game is fun, and it can be challenging for kids because the point of the game is that you have resources that you have to work among your team. And basically, it's an economic system that you have to work within. And do you recommend that parents set up a bank account or other things? And what age is appropriate for that? I think they should start a savings account at about 10 or so, but a checking account should probably be around 15 or 16, so that you can start teaching them how to use it, how to put money in, what they're doing with that money, having a purpose for it, rather than giving them an allowance. Starting young at like 5 or 6 years old, they have cash money, and and it's really easy to blow through it. But if they take the money and put it in the bank as they get a little older, then they can hold on to it for later. And as they need it, they can go to the bank and withdraw the money. And as they get more money, they can go to the bank and make future deposits on that. I strongly recommend that. It was my experience as I taught at Gallaudet. I also had often freshman students who would get a check, and it's the first time that they independently could spend money, and it was gone in 20 minutes. And then they didn't know what to do for food or other things as they went forward. So I think it's really important to plan with the children when they're young and they learn how to manage that. Now, how do parents support financial learning at home? We'd like to let you have a chance to respond. One thing that I see is from a comment from Debbie Sicoli. There are some free apps like Bankaroo and Piggybot, mock banks. Some of them include savings, spending, allowance, charity. What other apps would you recommend? Apps for financial spending. Well, I think I use ICL. It's practice playing fun banking games, but I'm not really sure I use an app on that. Setting up a business, developing a business. I'm sorry, my screen went blank there for a minute. Well, I'd like to, in my classroom, have more real life application. Apps, to me, still are back and forth, but I'd rather, apps are fine and they're great, but in the classroom, I use more real life application. I think we can teach children quite a bit of financial literacy through SimCity. I played that game. I didn't understand anything originally. I just, kept crashing the computer until I got around 10, 11, 12 years old. And then I started to understand the concepts behind it. Right, but you had the exposure. And it's so important to have exposure when they're young, even if they don't understand the concepts, because that exposure will help them have the fundamental pieces later as they learn more. And it's not often that, the first time we show them something, they understand it. It's a built upon skill, and that's why we start early. We ask green light's also something that I've seen from school with a parent-controlled debit card based on chores. We also have Wells Fargo, Bank of America. Other ones have different organizations that offer those same things. That's great. We do have different resources. If you look at the resources page, there are apps and other things there that you can try. Also, in Incel, it looks like the Prodigy is one that's included in the resources at the end. And you'll be able to see all of those at the end of the PowerPoint. We have a quick poll question. We're running out of time, so let's move on with the next poll question. Poll question number 3 is, what do you do at home with your kids to help them learn about money? And this is a write-in question. Please chat it in the type it in the chat box. I noticed another person talked about bankaroo.com. I've never tried it myself. Have you, Randy? No, I haven't. So Yeah, we need to look at that. So that's the point of this webinar, is so that we can all share resources and maybe add Bakeroo to our resource page. So thank you for that. Tegan recommended something called Greenlight. I will have to look into that also. This is what I love about teachers. We are so happy to share information. I love this, and we'll be able to add your information to our webinar resource page. So thank you for that. This is our last discussion question for tonight. How old should children be at what age should children become independent and able to manage their own funds? Independent management of their funds is much later. I would say they start young and they build on those skills, but they could over the age of 10, if you've started young and start teaching them about choices and spending and saving and those other skills, as they start to understand the concepts and want to open their own savings account around age of 10, I think is appropriate. And when they're 15, they can open a checking account and start to manage that independently. So I would say around 10. What are your thoughts, Joseph? Looking back with my family, they set up my first bank account when I was at about 11 years old, because I was planning to go to MSSD, and at the deaf school, they wanted to make sure that I had the knowledge before I went off to the other school. Yes, it's about right for me, about junior or high school. But prior to that, you need to have allowance to manage. Yes, to build that financial knowledge. I'm wondering, Randy, do you have any other things around timelines on banking accounts or other things? Do you think children should just be able to do whatever they want, or should you sit down and make decisions and discuss it together? I recommend that the parents sit down and monitor their account. When they go to the bank, and let them go to the bank, and that's fine. But when they withdraw money, you want to sit down and discuss it with them and ask them why they're spending that money, and ask them whether or not they thought it was a good decision. And if they want to have that withdrawal, then let them take it at that time. And if they have a complaint about it, then you've already discussed it, and that was their money, and they spent it the way that they wanted to. You also want to make sure that donations are made to charity. That's a good cause for a good reason, and that you give them guidelines. You don't just send them off on their own. You lead them through the process of good decision making as you expand that independence. You want to give them some guidance, and then when they get out into the real world, college or after, then they can be on their own. It's important for parents to start talking to children about preparing for the future at a young age. Yes, again, it's financial decision making, understanding what kind of jobs they're going to have in the future, and what those jobs earn. And helping them decide whether they want to make more money, and if they do, whether they want to go to training schools or college, how they advance their education to earn more money. Those are important concepts for them to understand. Once they graduate high school, they need to understand that they're just not going to immediately make a ton of money after they graduate. And they want to talk about future expenses like housing and cars, and whether or not they want to save money to buy a house. And they need to know how to save that money and know that it takes 1 to 2 years or longer. Some people just live in an apartment and spend continuously. Then they need to know that there's a result for that in the end. Well, that's really the hearts of this discussion, is coming back to the conversation about, having open communication with kids, being honest, and having those back and forth discussions about how that impacts them. And I think it requires some bravery on the part of the parents. Yes, and speaking about their own history and decision, about when they were frustrated or made mistakes and had to live with that, and how money affected their lives. And knowing that parents make mistakes too, or sometimes face struggles, is really important for them. It's perfect, it's good for them to know that we're not perfect. We also make mistakes. And you can talk to them. You don't have to tell them everything or burden them with it, but you do want to give them a little bit of information. And then at the same time, the parents can build a really strong relationship with their children. At what age do children become independent and able to manage their own funds? And your thoughts on all of that? I think we already got some responses on that. Carrie said, kids manage money for themselves that they earn at home, but she manages the bank accounts for now. So we're wondering, Carrie, can you, what age would you say for children? So Mike talks about, depending on the level of comprehension and maturity, often independence arrives with the first job or first paycheck. And Carrie said her kids are 14, 11, 8, and 5 weeks. Okay, we're going to move through this pretty quickly. Some of these were donated by Randy. Some of these were from Wells Fargo for hands-on banking. You can use some of these for your own benefit for planning and activities. Each activity matches the appropriate age as listed here. And Bank of America has a financial site that helps children develop their financial literacy with their goal of saving money for things. If you click on the links, you'll see things like a house, a car, activity planning for those things within that activity. And that's a really great tool. There are also online games and apps to teach kids about money and have fun. We talked about financial education in ASL, and CSD Learns has developed 4 courses related to financial education: banking, investment, credit and debit, and controlling financial management. Practical money skills. Yes, that's for K to 12 in the areas where, kindergartners should start. It shows you different categories like the standard curriculum ideas, which is really nice. So that's practical money skills. And the last resource we have here is to jumpstart financial smarts for students. Can you talk about what jumpstarting means? That includes the 6 categories I mentioned earlier, and talks about what to cover and what specifically is included for each age. And we have about 1 minute left, and we're going to have to wrap up our webinar. If we could go to the next slide, please. After we finish the webinar, you'll automatically be receiving a survey. Please give us feedback so we can continue this webinar as we move forward. At the next webinar, we'll talk about